Please, maybe you can also tell us your name first. Thank you.
I was curious, referring back to Carolyn Bertel's comment from the first panel, where the process of digitization was erasing some traces or somehow not digitized metadata of the original documents, how that might affect each of kind of the images or texts that were referred to in the different presentations.
Yes, the photographs that I study are digitalized. And this, in these short presentations, I did only a short stretch of my study, because what I do is the traveling and the journey that the photographs make. I study that traveling and then look at the meaning which the photographs receive in the different contexts. And this archive is digitalized and is stored here in the Tropenmuseum. And of course, a material photograph, a paper photograph, has a different emotional impact than a photograph that you see big on a screen, on a monitor, or here as a PowerPoint. And that's also one of the questions that you have to ask when you explore photographic archives.
Pamela, I have a very short question in relation to photographs, because usually in the colonial era photographs there are also written text on the back.
Yes.
And whether you also use that as material, part of this materiality of photographs.
Well, that's an interesting question, because there are all sorts of onderschriften, what's that in Engels?
Captions.
Captions, yes. And many of the photographs are put into albums. And in the context of an album, a photograph gets another meaning than when the photograph is loose, free, out of a context of an album. So everything that is written, everything that is making a context for these photographs, adds to the meaning of the photograph, to the changing meaning, of course.
And they were if in the process of digitalization, are they also?
Yes, yes. All the captions and everything that is written in underneath the photographs or at the back are being saved and stored.
Wim and Paul, do you have any comments on digitalization?
Well, actually, just to pick up on what Pamela said, the fact that you digitize, and of course these albums where photographs are put into specific places and in specific orders, you need to take that into account in order to get both the information but also the effect of the photographs. And this is one of the dangers of digitization, where you take these photographs out of context, but sometimes it does offer the opportunity for people to actually make up new albums. And this is what is happening, I see a lot from Indonesia. The digitization as an effect has that young people basically search at the internet. People are really tech savvy, and they take all these pictures and make new stories. And so that for me is also interesting. But yes, the digitization offers new possibilities, but also has these pitfalls of taking things out of context.
Well, I have my thinking of the things I work on. It's mainly positive digitization, because these texts would otherwise be unreachable. So, very brief.
I just wanted to say that Kunci actually reads the Manusia Bebas from PDF because it's available online, fortunately. Okay, we have another question. Wayne, please.
Yeah, this is both a comment and a question, and it really relates to Paul's presentation. Thank you, actually, excellent presentation. One of the things that I think is necessary in this project that we do is also to be careful, to be mindful of how we understand the institution. I think that a writing needs to be done on the dismantling of the Royal Tropical Institute, which is different from the Tropenmuseum. So when you say books have disappeared, books were never in the Tropa Museum in the same way that you're talking about. There was a library that was a part of the Royal Tropical Institute. So I think that is an urgent study that needs to be done now, because it's still so fresh, that we understand what it meant to dismantle the institution and how does that relate to the different parts. So that's the first thing. Now, going to your project itself, though, I wonder if I understood you correctly, because are you suggesting two things? One, that the decolonial process, like citizenship, is always in the future, it's always a labor that one needs to work at, which is future-oriented, that it is never settled. So is that what you're suggesting? Or what are you suggesting in relationship to the museum itself? Because in a way I could also say that you are right, that our representation, both of the Caribbean or Indonesia, has never really included much of the anti-colonial revolutionary histories that are a part of that. It is that has been not so much a part of the history that we've represented. So what are you suggesting in relationship to the museum itself?
Wayne, thank you for a complicated question. That's what you're here for. First of all, about your first comment, I realized that about the institution and the museum, that they are not the same. Did the museum ever have a library of its own, or is this not?
Well, the museum had a library. We had a small library downstairs there.
It's still,
but
yeah.
I mean, we do have what is called the Handboekerij, and the Handboekerij is still a part of what we have here as a place that one can consult. Parts of the archives are here as well still. And some of it will move into a central documentation center for research that will be for all four museums. But that, I think, must be made separate from the closure of the library that was the kit. So I think
maybe I should frame it more broadly then. I think it's very meaningful that the absence and even the taking away of Indonesian writing in the Netherlands is now countered in a way by bringing an Indonesian author, or I should say a character from an Indonesian novel here to the heart of the museum. So from a bit of a broader perspective, I think it's very meaningful that this has been done. I think that citizenship is a work in progress, but decolonization should not be. Decolonization should have an end, indeed, and in that sense, I don't see them as at least I hope it will have an end. And talking about what this means. For the museum, you asked, right? Well, I hope that the museum, but I know you are doing this, is a place where discussions about citizenship and decolonization can meet. And I think this is also one thing that, but I hope to, I'm also curious what Kunshi will say. Maybe Kunshi is also thinking about here, how a decolonization of the museum, if you look at it in a broader context, has to go together with the rethinking of citizenship in both the Netherlands and in Indonesia.
Well, before giving a place and time for Kunci to answer, since after this we will also have a session for Kunci and Pim, the curator of Netherlands, is in this exhibition to have a conversation. I want to also bring Wayne's question to Pamela and Wim, since in a way, Wim, your presentation about the dramatization of the personal life of Rumphius was also somehow resonate in the mannequin that we have in the Netherlands in this exhibition. And at the same time, Pamela, if you see I believe you already see the exhibition there. There are actually precisely photographs of these happy and beautiful Dutch families in the exhibition room. And I wonder whether you as a researcher and also who might believe that we can rethink how museums should display this kind of objects and figures, what kind of gesture should be made.
Thank you. Well, actually, it shows that permanent exhibitions are never permanent. They are a reflection of the discussion that was there in the beginning of the 21st century that in the end resulted in Auswärts, where the purpose was to have these mannequins reflect certain discussions, discourses on colonialism. What we see now, 12, 13 years later, is that in certain ways the discussion has developed and has moved forward. So perhaps it is time to say goodbye to Rumphius and to move to other persons and figures from colonial history. So, for instance, if we would have a new exhibition on the Netherlands Indies and the transformation and the independence, why not feature August 17th as an important date to commemorate and to talk and think about in this museum, but also make the connection to the fact that August 17th is not only important in an Indonesian context, but it's also Tula Day, the commemoration of a large uprising against Dutch colonial rule on the island of Curaçao. And so to make these connections between resisting colonial rule in the East and the West, and to look for new ways to connect also this museum with the monument in the Oosterpark that commemorates the abolishment of enslavement of people in the West. So new ways of looking at it. Briefly.
I agree that I think that the expositions in museums should be temporarily, not permanent, because every time and every group brings a different perspective and a different meaning, and gives a different meaning to the objects. Objects are, of course, not static, meaningful objects. They are given meanings. And what I think is important also is that not only official curators make expositions in museums, but also groups of people who live, well, in England they do that. They give the people who live around the museum the chance to make an exposition in the museum. That's great. And I think an exposition in a museum or wherever has, of course, a sort of function of giving information, but in the first place to raise questions about not only about the objects but also about appearances and people, and I think 17th of August would be great to have a next exposition here.
Thank you, Pamela. It's really good to say that museums are actually a place to raise questions, but unfortunately, due to time restraint, I have to say you cannot ask questions anymore now in the museum.